فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب. الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So inshallah we'll get started today with the hayat of the salah, and these are the things that beautify the prayer. And the hayat to the salah are like the hair to a person, or they're like the nice clothes that we would have, or like the hair to the person, the thing that beautifies the person, but without it the person is still a person. And as opposed to the arkan, which are the pillars of the salah, and without them then the salah ceases to exist, such as like without a neck or something, and then this person is no longer there. And then we also have the abad for the salah, which is like the tashahhud, the first tashahhud that we mentioned. And he called them Sunnan. In this book, he said that they were Sunnan for the first tashahhud, and also some of the other scholars, they'll say abad, because this is something that must be done in a general sense. But if someone forgot it, then they make the sujood sahw for it, and they don't need to go back and redo their prayer because of it. It doesn't invalidate their prayer from them forgetting it, but rather they would make the sujood sahw for missing these things from the sunan actions. And as far as the hayat, if someone misses them, then in this case it doesn't require anything from them. They missed out on a reward, but they keep going with their salah. They started with the next thing of their salah and they missed one of these hayat, then they leave it because they started with the next rukun, or the next pillar of the salah. They would leave whatever the hayat were from before, because the salah has to be done in order. We can't do it outside of the order that it has been given to us in. So we need to make sure everything's in order. So if we forgot one of them, then we missed out on doing it, and the chance is gone, and we just keep moving forward after that. And it doesn't affect the validity of the salah. No one's a sinner for leaving it, but rather this is something that is of the sunnah, or something that's supposed to have. It's good for someone to do, and it's a part of the things that make the salah beautiful. And so we talked about in the last class the first three, and I'll go over them quickly just to make sure that they're all together in one place. And he says here in the Mutn Abu Shujaa, rahimahullah, he says, وَهَيْئَاتُهَا خَمْسَ عَشْرَةَ خَصْلَةً, which he says that there's 15 things that beautify the prayer. And he says 15 here, but of course, like a lot of the other scholars, they will give many of these things, and some of them even put it over 100. So the number here he's giving just as some of the basic ones. And of course, there's much more to like the details of perfecting the salah and whatnot. And of course, there's been many hadith that are narrated in regards to how the Prophet ﷺ would pray the salah, and what he would say inside of it, and how he would move about inside the salah. And so these things can reach a much higher number than 15 things when it comes to the sunnah. But the author here, he gives 15 because this is a beginning book for people. And so of them, he says the first one is رفع اليدين عند تكبيرة الإحرام وعند الركوع والرفع منه. And so here he says that raising the hands, رفع اليدين, so raising the hands at three different times he gives here. One is the opening takbir, when we say Allahu Akbar, and the second one is when bowing, is when we're going into ruku', and the third is when coming up from it. And this is during the ruku' and when coming up from it. So it's not like before it and then making ruku', but it'd be like during it and then coming up from it. And these are the general three times that he gives here. And there's also another time which could be added, which is narrated, is when someone is coming up from the sitting of the first tashahhud. So when they're in their second rak'ah and they're sitting in the tashahhud, when they stand up from that rak'ah, this is also another time to raise the hands. And the way that someone raises their hands is there's two different narrations now of one that the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands to his shoulders, like that they were like parallel with his shoulders in that sense. So you could raise your hand to the shoulders where you're at this level, or you can raise it to your ears. So like raising it higher. So either you could raise it to your shoulders, or you could raise it to your ears. And some of the scholars, they said mixing between the two. They'd say the bottom of your hands were at the shoulders, and then the top of your hand would be at like your ears, like the for that. So they'd make a mix between these two. So putting their hands where the bottoms of them are to their shoulders, and the top ones are level with their ears. And of course, like putting like the thumbs inside the ears is not something that is narrated from the Sunnah. And some people, you'll find people that flip their earlobes when they're doing this. There's no hadith that points to this meaning, but rather his hands were at the level of his ears, and this is the understanding that the scholars hold in general. And so these are the three times that he mentioned here, which were when the opening takbir, when bowing and coming up from it, and also adding to this when someone is standing up from the second rakah into the third rakah after making tashahhud. This is also another time to raise the hands, and this is narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, and this is something that is agreed upon in general. So then also the next thing that he says of the sunnah is for someone to put their wad or yamin ala shimal. So someone can putting their right hand up on the left hand. And this is in general, this is a part of the sunnah that is narrated from the Prophet ﷺ that or it's narrated on Wa'il ibn Hajr, and that he saw the Prophet ﷺ, that he would raise his hands and whatnot, and then he would put his left he would put his right hand on his left hand, and this is what's narrated from that. So in general, the yad in Arabic, as I mentioned before, it goes from the beginning. This goes from here all the way to the actual to the shoulder. This in general is yad, but sometimes when we look at some of these things, we wouldn't necessarily say that yad is all of the arm. So it would be, we would translate it as hand sometimes. And also in this case, it could be forearm. So like saying the yad. So if someone were to put their hands here, this is fine. This is also one hand on the yad, and also going like to here. So all of these things are fine if someone wants to put it like this, or they want to put their hands on top of the actual like the kef, on top of like the back of their hand, whether it's like a hand on top, like we would say in English, a hand on top of a hand, or in that way. All of this is fine, and there's no there's not necessarily a special way that is the right way, and the other ways are wrong. And so in general, any way that somebody puts this on their hand while they're in the standing part, this is what is sunnah for them to do. As far as like after they stand up from ruku', do they put their hands on their chest, or do they put them by their sides and whatnot? This is a difference of opinion. Some have said that in general, when someone is in salah, they would put their hand on top of the other hand, looking at, this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. But this is also a view that it's a difference of opinion in either way you go. There's no problem with the salah, and it's not like someone's doing a bid'ah or something of that sort. But rather, if someone chooses to do it, then this is fine. And there's evidence in a general sense that the Prophet ﷺ used to put his hand on his chest, but it doesn't necessarily specify that this was after ruku' or not. So in this particular place, we don't know. Like in a specific way. And so if someone did this is fine. And the Shafi'i view is that they would put their hands to the side when they come up, after coming up out of ruku'. They would put their hands to their side before going down into sujood. And wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so the next thing that the author here he brings, after putting the right hand on top of the left, he also says saying the opening supplication. And so this is going back to this is as if we're beginning the salah, starting with raising the hand, saying Allahu Akbar, then putting the right hand on top of the left, and then saying the opening supplication. And there's different supplications that are mentioned, which he'll say in here in the Mutn, he says what tawajjuh, and the word tawajjuh is based from the beginning of the hadith. Or the dua that starts from the hadith, وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ حَنِيفًا وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, which means that I pointed my face to the one that created the heavens and the earth. Hanifa, which is like turning away from, which it means like turning away from the disbelievers and turning towards Allah. So it has this turning away from the crowd or from the people and pointing and going towards the way of Allah. What ma ana min al-mushrikeen, which means I'm not of those people that make shirk with Allah, the mushrikeen. Inna salati, this is the next part of the dua. Inna salati was nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin. La sharika lah. And then he's saying that in that my verily my salah and my acts of worship and my maya, which means my life, my living, wa mamati, and my death is for Allah, the Lord, Rabbil Alameen, the Lord of the worlds. La sharika la, and that there's no partner in this. And وَبِذَلِكَ umirt, and this is what I've been called to do, or been that I've been ordered to do. وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and I'm from the Muslims. And so this is a beautiful dua that the Prophet ﷺ would start off when he would stand up for salah. This was one of the dua that he would recite after entering salah, and this would be the first thing that they would recite and before going into reading the Fatiha. And before that, we also have the isti'adha, and that's the next thing that the author here he brings in. And so he says, as the number, as like the fourth thing, he says, "Wal isti'adha," and the isti'adha is something that comes from what Allah says in the Quran. فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. That if you wanted to recite the Quran, then فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, like give the isti'adha, which is saying أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. And then to seek refuge in Allah from the shaitan. Ar-Rajim, which means like that that the shaitan has a couple different meanings, but this is one of the terms is that he is thrown out, like he's thrown out from the goodness of Allah, and that he has been thrown out, of course, from Jannah and whatnot, and that he is rejected is what rajim is one of the meanings of it. And another meaning of rajim is also that he is like stones are thrown at him. So he is the one who is being stoned from like being pelted with stones. And then the other meaning is that he is the one that is throwing. So this is another meaning, is that he is the one that's throwing. Then he would throw. What does he throw? He throws like the whispers to people. So there's multiple different meanings to this word rajim that the scholars will mention, and of them are these either that he's being pelted with stones, or that he's pelting other people with whispers and like calling them to do evil and whatnot, or that, and also it encompasses the fact that he is also thrown out, that he himself is like rejected. And so these are some of the meanings that come with the word rajim. And so this is a sunnah to do before every single time of reciting Quran, whether you're in Salah or outside of Salah. This is a sunnah for someone to start off before they recite Quran, to start off with this. And so in Salah, every time that you start off recitation of the Quran in every single rak'ah, then this is sunnah for you to start with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, to the end of the Fatiha. And so this place comes up every time in every single rak'ah, as opposed to the opening dua. The opening supplications happens when you come in at the beginning of when you start salah only. And the next thing here that he brings up in the fifth one was وَالْجَهْرُ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ وَالْإِسْرَارُ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ. And so in jahr is reciting out loud, and the sixth one, which is reciting quietly, and israr, which is reciting quietly. And reciting quietly means that you are reciting in a way that if you were in a quiet environment, like if there's no sound around you, and you're whispering to yourself, you can hear yourself. This is what reciting quietly is. It doesn't mean reciting in your head, like reciting in your mind, or reciting in your heart, or without moving your lips. This is not called reciting. In general, this is not called reciting. So, and this is a mistake that some people fall into when they think that they think recite quietly means to just think about it in your mind. And just sitting there and thinking about the Fatiha and like running it over in your mind. This is not considered reciting. So the person that does this, their salah, they never came with that rukun of reciting Fatiha for example, or even the opening takbir, they need to say Allahu Akbar. They need to say, or like they need to at least whisper Allahu Akbar when they're coming into the salah. And they need to say these adhkar, especially the ones that are the pillars. They need to say these in a way that they can hear themselves if they were in a quiet environment. Of course, it doesn't need to be louder to where the person next to them hears them, or that they are confusing the person next to them with what they're saying and the person is hearing them and whatnot. Of course, they take into consideration the other people around them. But for them in general, whenever they're quiet in this is something that if all of there was no background noise, and then they would be able to hear themselves saying it. Their tongue is actually moving, and this is what reciting quietly entails. And so and in general, there's the general principle: when do we recite out loud for the Quran? Recite out loud whenever the sun is not out. And when the sun is out, such as in daytime, then in this time we would recite silently for the Quran. And this is with the exception of Eid and Jum'ah and what's like that. So these two prayers are prayed out loud, even though the sun is out. But in general, we would look at this. So all of the Sunnan prayers, all the Sunnah prayers that come, whether it's in Fajr, like from Fajr Sunnah, or whether it's like the Sunnah Maghrib or Isha or Qiyam al-Layl, all of this, the sun is not out, so this would also be recited out loud for the actual recitation of the Quran. And this is a general principle. But of course, if you're in like a masjid or something and you're reciting out loud, is going to disturb others around you while they're praying. And maybe throws them off and whatnot. Hearing someone recite while they're trying to recite and do the adhkar in their salah, then you can be quiet in this case, because of course we should never be disturbing other people, and this takes precedence of not disturbing other people takes precedence over us accomplishing a sunnah. And that's also a general principle. So these are the times in general that someone would recite out loud and recite in quietly with that. And then the next thing that the author he mentions here, he says what ta'meen. And ta'meen is saying ameen. And so saying ameen when because the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned when when the imam says وَلَا or when he gives ameen, say ameen. So فَقُولُوا ameen. And so he says, so say ameen at the end of that. And of course, whoever's ameen aligns with the ameen of the malaika, then this is a cause for his previous sins to be forgiven. And so this is, of course, a great thing that someone should always make sure that they say Ameen. And in the salat that are out loud, we would say Ameen out loud. And in the salat that are silent, if we have a leader that's before us, when we say Ameen, we would say it at the end of what our recitation of the Fatiha, because we don't know when he said it. And so we would say it at the end of us reciting Fatiha. And this is something that is clear that this is something to be said at the end of the Fatiha, whether it's at the end of Wala Dolin or when the Imam says Ameen. And this is a sunnah that is a very good sunnah, especially with the reward that is accompanied by it, by whoever's Ameen is in agreement with the Ameen of the Malaika, which are also giving Ameen. They're also saying Ameen with the Imam and they pray alongside. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, that his sins, all of his sins that came before, would be forgiven for him. Of course, this is the sins that don't require, like the big sins, they require a repentance for that individual sin, and with tawbah and making things right if it's with another person. But in regards to the other sins that aren't of the kaba'ir, of the great sins, then these are the sins that are normally in all of these hadith that say that he will be forgiven for all of his sins that came before. These are the sins that aren't the big sins, the major sins. The major sins, they need tawbah, and this person needs to repent for that individual sin for it to be there. And the next thing that he brings up is he says وَقِرَاءَةُ السُّورَةِ بَعْدَ الْفَاتِحَةِ, and this is also reciting a surah after the Fatiha. And this is a sunnah for someone to do, and this is in the first two rakahs. So when someone is in the first two rakahs, then he recites a surah after the Fatiha. And if this is something that is sunnah for someone to do, and he says here reciting a surah, and so reciting a surah is like an actual, like a full surah. which is understood here. And this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to recite a surah after the Fatiha. And this is sometimes people will pick out bits and pieces from other surah, and they will recite from this. And while this is okay, and then you're reciting something after that, the best of the sunnah is to recite with the full surah. And of course, like the shorter surah, the shorter surat are the things that are easy for people to actually like if you're praying with a group of people, you shouldn't necessarily pray with a Baqarah if it's going to cause harm on them, and not everybody is happy with that. And of course, whenever we pray, if we're ever leading someone or whoever the leader is, they need to take into consideration the weakest person possible. So whenever they're praying, they should always make sure that the prayer is in a way that the weakest person, or the person who has a busy, very busy schedule and whatnot, he takes this person's weakness into consideration, and he leads according to that weakness, and he doesn't necessarily try to go the extra mile with the congregational prayers, especially if it's in a masjid. And if the masjid is open to the public in general, and anyone can come in at any time, then the person needs to pray according to the weakest person. And this is because of the Prophet ﷺ. He got very upset when someone was making the salah very long, and so the Prophet ﷺ, he got very upset with the person who was elongating the salah such to a point where other people would delay coming to the salah because it was so long, so that they couldn't handle all of that. They had business to go about, and to the point where other people would leave the salah and go pray by themselves, and they would leave the congregation and pray by themselves because they just couldn't handle the length of the salah. So of course, the person that's leading, he should always make sure that he's praying according to the weakest link. And this is very important, so that he doesn't make fitna for the people who came to salah and they're ready to pray in congregation. And then if the person like just makes the salah super long, then this could be a cause for this person leaving the congregation, and this great thing that should be done. And so, and then also, if someone did read just a part of a surah, this is fine, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just the sunnah is to recite an actual surah. But if someone reads something else, this is fine as well. Another point also, if somebody the first surah, when they read in the first rak'ah, this should be in general should be longer than the second surah in general. So if you're gonna pick a surah, then pick something that is longer for the first surah, and then the second surah, the second or for the first rak'ah, and then for the second rak'ah you would have something that is slightly shorter. And this, of course, if someone is trying to catch up to the salah and they're coming in late and whatnot, that being the first one being longer than the second means that maybe they can catch the first rak'ah, and then the second one is easier for the people that are already there. As opposed to if someone lengthens the second rak'ah instead of the first rak'ah, then they're shortening the time that someone could have caught with to get the full salam with the imam. Also, if somebody comes late, say they come into someone comes in at the last rak'ah or the second to last rak'ah, like Isha, and they were to then stand up afterwards and they recite the two, like of course they pray two rak'ahs with the imam and he recites silently, and they recite silently with him. Then in the last two rakat, and this is also a time, the opinion of the Shafi'i opinion is that they would also in these last two rakah, they would also make up for that time where they had two surahs. So after each time they recite the Fatiha, they would also recite another surah afterwards to make up for that thing that they missed. So I'm praying at the last two. This is fine because he's making up for something that was missed here. And this is the view of Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah. And also another thing in regards to this is that the person that is being led, and he's not the imam, but rather he's being led, and he hears the surah other than the Fatiha being recited, then he should be silent. He shouldn't be reciting with his tongue and whatnot alongside of the imam. He should be silent and listening to the recitation. And this is because of the that Allah says that if when you're hearing the Quran, if the Quran is recited, فَأَنْسِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, And so that the Prophet said that when someone is in Salah, Allah says that they should be ansitu, and if they're hearing the Quran, Allah says then they should be quiet so that they would receive rahmah and that they would be forgiven. And this is important. A lot of people, they will recite alongside of the imam because they know the surah and they want to keep up with their hifz and whatnot. But this particular ayah. When we look at the tafsir that is given by the Salaf and whatnot, they say that this particular ayah is for salah, is for the recitation that happens inside of salah. So this is the time when someone is inside salah, they should be silent. And there's also a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he was praying, and and then at the end of the prayer he said لَعَلَّكُمْ تَقْرَؤُونَ خَلْفَ إِمَامِكُمْ, that he says, I think, yeah, you guys are probably reciting behind your imam, like meaning himself. And they said, yes, we do. And they replied, the Sahaba said, yeah, we do this. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تفعلوا إلا بفاتحة الكتاب فإنه لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بها. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, don't do this. Don't do this recitation with the Imam. But except with the Fatiha. Except with the Fatiha. Because the Fatiha, there's no salah except for the person who reads the Fatiha. So of course he gives the exception for the Fatiha. This is something that he can do. But it's for the other surah, and when someone is reading, when the Imam is reciting, then the person that is hearing the Imam should not recite anything else at this time. Of course, if there is a point where he can't hear the imam, such as he's very far and there's no speaker system and whatnot, he can recite something else until he finds out that it's time for ruku'. But if he can hear the imam, then he doesn't recite anything, and he would just listen and ponder the Quran. And this is it's very important that they are keen on listening and pondering the meanings of the Quran. And the next thing that the author here comes in and he talks about is, he says, وَالتَّكْبِيرَاتُ عِنْدَ الرَّفْعِ وَالْخَفْضِ. And so he says here in the takbirat, which is saying Allahu Akbar, when moving up and down, like with the different movements. And this is for all the movements except for coming up from ruku'. And this is a sunnah for someone to do, and it's during the time that they're going up and down. And so this is something that they should make sure that they do this while they're in the movement. So sometimes someone will go down into the place, and then they'll say Allahu Akbar, or sometimes they will go into sujood, and before going into sujood they'll say Allahu Akbar, and then they'll move. But the time for it is while they're in the movement. This is something that is to be done while they're in the movement from the one thing to the other. And the same thing goes for saying Sami Allahu liman hamida. So when someone says this is while they're coming up from ruku'. And he says this is the next one here, in Sami Allahu liman hamida. And this is while someone is coming up from ruku', while they're in the movement, they say Sami Allahu liman hamida. And if somebody they delay this, they could affect the validity of someone's salah by doing this, or like the rak'ah at least. Because if someone is catching with the imam, then if he catches the imam while he's in ruku', then he caught the rak'ah. If he comes into ruku' at the same time that the imam's in ruku', then he caught the rak'ah. But if the imam, he comes up and then he's standing and he didn't say Sami Allahu liman hamida, maybe the person, when he goes into ruku', he doesn't know that the imam just stood. And then the imam, while he's standing, he says Sami Allahu liman hamida, and he's been standing for a while now. If he came in and he made ruku' and the imam's already standing, then this doesn't count for him. And of course, the person should try to be aware of where the imam's at. When he comes in and makes ruku', that he sees that the imam is still in ruku', if the imam is not aware of this particular masala. But occasionally this happens where the imam will stand up and he's standing, and the other person will go into ruku' thinking he got the rak'ah, and he missed it. But the imam then says Sami Allahu liman hamida. He comes up thinking that the imam was in the ruku' that whole time. So this is a thing that the imam should be keen to make sure that when he says Sami Allahu liman hamida, he starts when he's starting the movement, and that he ends so that the people that are following him, they know that they either caught the rak'ah or they didn't catch the rak'ah. And so this is when somebody comes up. And then this is for everyone to say too. Like the Sami Allahu liman hamida, this is for the imam, as well as it's for the people that are following the imam. because of the general evidences that the Prophet ﷺ, he told people to follow him in his prayer and everything, and like Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. So he says, pray as you have seen me pray. So when we pray in the exact same way that the Prophet ﷺ prays, unless some other evidence comes that goes against it, such as being silent during the recitation of the other surah after the Fatiha. This is we have a direct command on this to be silent and to listen. But when it comes to this there's no direct command that says don't say Sami Allahu liman hamida. But rather there is the Prophet ﷺ after this. When he talks about this, he said to say Rabbana wa lakal hamd after the Imam says Sami Allahu liman hamida. And some people understood from this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ is, if the Imam says Sami Allahu liman hamida, then say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And so some people understood from this that you wouldn't say Sami Allahu liman hamida alongside of the Imam. This is an understanding, but it's not spoken in the hadith. And so taking this understanding from the hadith, that's not actually something he said, that goes against the general concept of following the Prophet ﷺ. This is the Shafi'is. They would look at this and they would say, no, everybody says Sami Allahu liman hamida because we all follow the Imam. And then the reason the Prophet ﷺ said, say Rabbana wa lakal hamd after that is because he would be saying this silently. So this was a point or a time for like teaching them that this is what you say after the Imam says this. After you said this, then you would say this as well, because this is what the Imam is saying silently, or this is what he was saying, the Prophet ﷺ was saying silently. So this was the time that for you to say this as well. And of course, these go together. And Sami Allahu liman hamida means Allah hears, which this is a hearing that means like listens, or in a way of responding for the one who praises him. So Allah hears the one who praises him. Of course, Allah hears everything, but this is a special hearing, such as like listening and taking their requests, and hearing in a means of he's going to answer for the one who praises him. And then after we say this, then we say Rabbana wa lakal hamd, or Rabbana lakal hamd, Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. There's different versions of this, and all of these are fine, and to change them up is also good to do. All of these are narrated from whether it's Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd, or Allahumma Rabbana lakal hamd without the wa, or whether it's Rabbana lakal hamd or Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And all of these have a subtle difference in the meaning, but they all basically mean the same thing, that we're calling on Allah and saying that for you is the praise, or the hamd. And so this is these are different ways to say it, and all of this is to be done. There's also more things to be said after this, like extra adhkar after saying this. And these are things that are also narrated that the author here doesn't bring into the text here. He also says with tasbih fi ruku'i was sujud. And tasbih is saying subhana rabbiyal azim when you're in ruku', and saying subhana rabbiyal a'la when you're in sujud. And so these are something that he brings here in the hayat. And these are something that it's sunnah in the Shafi'i madhab to do these things. And if somebody left it out, it wouldn't affect the validity of their salah, and they're not a sinner for leaving it out. Rather, this is something that's sunnah for them to do. And this is also like the takbirat in the moving. And with us, this is something that is sunnah for them to do, and they're not a sinner for if they don't do this. And the Hanabila, or like the people from the Hanbali madhab, they would say that this is something that is obligatory for someone to do. This is the wajibat. This is obligatory for someone to do, and that they need to make sujood sahwi for not doing it. And this is something that's a difference of opinion. So leaving the differences of opinion in general is mustahab. Like this is good for someone to leave the difference of opinion. So at least come with one of these every single time to make sure that your salah is valid in the view of everyone else. And they would view this as a higher. They would view this at the same rank as someone making tashahhud. Like this is an essential part. This is in the Hanbali madhab, and there are evidences that make that view like they give it weight. But for the takbirat, they give this. I would like, because of the evidences that not all of the Sahaba were doing this, and when someone did it from the Sahaba, they were like, "What's this?" The other Sahaba were like, "What are you doing?" So it proves that if all of them weren't doing it, or like a big majority of them weren't doing that, and then some of them did do it because they saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing it, then this proves that this isn't something that's obligatory. Rather, it's something that is mustahab. Otherwise, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have commanded them with this in particular, because many of them were leaving it. And so this was the understanding of many of the Sahaba, that it wasn't obligatory for the takbirat, saying Allahu Akbar for everything. But the tasbih in the ruku' and sujood, this also comes, this comes that the Prophet ﷺ, he would tell them to azimuhu fi ruku'. And so like to do this in ruku', say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, which is the meaning of that. And this comes in hadith, so it's best to do it, to leave the difference of opinion. And at the least amount is one, and it's best to do it in odd numbers. So in like the least of the best amount to do is like three. Three, it's good to do three, and then to do more than that is great. There's also other dua to be said in this time as well. And also in ruku', in ruku' and sujood, there's no reciting of the Quran. This is something the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited people from reciting the Quran in their ruku' and their sujood. And of course, this is for reciting the Quran as it's Quran. But if you're taking a dua from the Quran and you're praying with this dua that's from the Quran, then it's fine for you to pray with this dua, because you're not intending to recite Quran, but rather you're intending to ask Allah for something in particular. And so there's no problem doing that. And then also the next thing that the author here he gives is, he says, وَوَضْعُ الْيَدَيْنِ عَلَى الْفَخِذَيْنِ فِي الْجُلُوسِ. And then this is when someone is sitting then between like the two sujood, when he when he's sitting, to put his both of his hands on his thighs while he's in that sitting. And also just a note for when someone is in sujood, we talked about that they should say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, but also the Prophet ﷺ, he said that this is the closest that the abd is to his Rabb, is while he's in sujood. And so this is the time that the Prophet ﷺ said فَأَكْثِرُ الدُّعَاء. So he's the closest to his Rabb while he's in sujood, meaning that he's in that state where he's close, like his dua is closest to being accepted. And of course, when the abd or when the servant is on his face and he's worshiping Allah, and his face is to the ground, and this is the act of lowliness, of us putting ourselves low and saying that Allah is the Most High. This is of course the closest that the abd is to like the reality of his relationship between him and Allah. And so this is a time also for his dua to be accepted when he's in this state. So to pray with other dua while he's in sujood is something that is sunnah for someone to do. To pray with, to have other dua if he's asking for something, or if he wants Allah to help him with something, and he brings other dua that are from the Quran and Sunnah, and at this time, then this is also one of the best times for his prayers to be answered. And so this is the time to do that. And so I'm going back to what the author here says about putting the hands on the thighs, and this is when sitting. And then he says here, and how does someone sit? And so when it comes to the sitting happens between the two sujood, and then also at the end of the second rak'ah, and at the end of the last rak'ah. Of course, there's going to be sitting, and so he talks about this. How do we sit? And so he says here, he says, يبسط اليسرى ويقبض اليمنى إلا المسبحة فإنه يشير بها متشهدا. And so he says here, this is while he's laying. So he's got his hands on his thighs, and then he says making the left hand flat. So he has the left hand flat on his thighs, and the right hand a fist. And so you have a fist, except for the index finger pointed when making tashahhud. And this is the way that he gives it here. And there's multiple ways of doing this. Someone could make a ring with their middle finger, and they can point with that. That's fine. And also, if they were to point like this is fine. And there's also a narration that the Prophet ﷺ used to make like the number which was 54. And this is like a number that is given. And the Arabs, they used to count with their hands. They would count with their hands, and when they would count with their hands, they had a special way of doing it. So they would count with, say, we take these first three fingers here. These first three fingers, they have three different actions that they can do, and they would create 9, and then they would make 10 over here. So this would be 1. This is the first action. They would have 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is bringing this out and bringing it out. 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9, 10, and this is the 10. And then you'd have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. There's the 50 here. 60, and then you'd have 70 putting it on the inside, and you have 80 putting it on the outside of this this little 3 here, and then 90, and then that would be the end of it going into 100 if you were to count. And so actually it was 53 is the number that is mentioned here. So it'd be number 3, which is 1, 2, 3, and then 53, and this was the number that's narrated in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ would use when he was doing this. Some of the scholars, they said it should actually be 93, because that 53 was just kind of like a close thing. They say do it like this, which is this would be, or not 93, but it'd be 59. So they'd say do it like in this number. This is the way that the Arabs used to count, and this is what my Sheikh Ahmed Makrami, he taught me in this way, or he taught, this is the way that he was taught by his shuyukh, how the Arabs used to count with their hands. So we'll get different counting mechanisms with the hands. I've seen a couple other ways that are out there. This is the way that I've seen from my sheikh, that he explained how to count with the hands. And this is he talked about this in this particular thing. And this is also great for someone if they're wanting to learn how to count with their hands, so they don't need to use beads. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pulling it out. 5, 6, or like then it would be 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 5, and then going all the way through. That's 9, and then 20, and then 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And so this is an easy way to do this. And the Arabs, they could tell each other a number just with their hands by doing this. The other Arab would know what he was talking about. And so this is a benefit, and this is definitely a benefit that is hard to find. So inshallah, this is useful for you all. And so this is in regards to pointing during the tashahhud. Also, do we move our fingers in the tashahhud or not? This is something that the majority of the scholars, they say no, this is not something that you should move your fingers in that. And the reason is because there's a hadith, in a lot of the hadith they come across that the Prophet ﷺ would point with his finger, but we don't have that he moved his finger. And then one narrator in the group of narrators that narrate this hadith said, and he moved it. And this extra, and he moved it, this addition in this particular hadith, a lot of the scholars of hadith said it's not actually a valid addition. Like this person went against it, and he made this, and this was him saying it from himself, where he added something without evidence in the hadith. And this is the area of ijtihad. Like this is the area of where there's room for people to disagree. And so if somebody moves their finger, then this is something that, like they're following the person that says that this hadith is sahih, or like this addition in the hadith is sahih, then they would move their finger according to if they believe that this is that way. But the view of the Shafi'i madhab, and this is of course many of them are very, very knowledgeable when it comes to hadith, they say this is something that is makruh, or like it's disliked to move the finger while they're in tashahhud, while they're doing this. It's disliked for them to move their finger because there's no authentic evidence that came in regards to moving the finger, and this is something extra that requires actual authentic evidence. And they saw this addition in the hadith as something that was shadh, which means like something that went against the rest of the body. If we have all the narrators are here, and this guy brings in something extra, where'd you get this extra? And so then they look at this extra and they say, is this person trustworthy with this? And even if he is trustworthy, he's still subject to mistakes sometimes. So if everyone is narrating this way and you came up with this, and the person that you're narrating from, all of their students that narrate from him as well, they all narrate this way and you're narrating this way, they say there's a problem with this. And so this is of the issues. Of course, the people of hadith, they definitely look into all of these different narrations, and this is why there's volumes of books when it comes to hadith in the same hadith being narrated from different narrators, because they will look at all the different narrators, and if one person goes against a group of narrators, then they know this person either he got this information from someone else, or that he had some extra information that the other people didn't have, or that he made a mistake. And this is one of the ways of catching mistakes, is that one person will narrate something in a way different than the rest of the people. And so this is the ways that they catch mistakes. And so they would call it, a lot of them would say that this is a mistake. And the people that don't say it's a mistake, they say that rather this person had something extra that the other people didn't catch. And since he's trustworthy, we take it. This is a difference of opinion when it comes to hadith. And like, inshallah, if you see somebody moving their finger, never get on their case about it. And if someone says that you need to be moving your finger, also, that the basis is that many of the scholars have said that this is not authentic. So and then the last thing that he says is here, waliftirash fi jami' al-jalasat. And so he's talking about how do we sit. And this is the iftirash is the way where you would sit on you have your left foot under your buttocks, and you have this facing down onto the ground. You're sitting on the back of on like the palm of the foot, if you want to say it that way. But you're sitting on this, and then you have your right foot up, and it's pointed towards the toes, are pointed towards the front. And so this is the way it's called iftirash. And this, you do this in all of the times of sitting in the salah. Anytime you're sitting in salah in general, you sit in this way, and this is the sitting that's prescribed in salah. And it's easy for you to stand up from this type of sitting as well. And so this he says here, waliftirash, which is sitting on the left foot flat down and the right foot upright with the toes pointing forward in all of the sittings. And then the next thing he says, what tawarruk في جلسة في جلسة الأخيرة. And then this is sitting in tawarruk, which is like sitting on the buttocks with the left foot under the right shin. So if you have the left foot, you tuck it under so that your left buttock is on the ground, actually sitting on the ground. It's more comfortable with the left foot under the right shin, with the right foot upright, as mentioned before, in the last sitting. And so this is for the last sitting, and this is if you are finishing the salah. If you're gonna finish the salah in this sitting, then this is the time that you do this. If you're gonna stand up afterwards, no, then you would sit with the other one which is iftirash. Then you would sit in that one until you're at the last sitting, and then you could sit in this way. The same thing is if you need to make sujood sahwa afterwards, then you would sit with iftirash, not tawarruk, because you are going to do something at the end of this. And so if there's anything else that's left to be done in the salah, you don't sit with tawarruk, but rather you sit with iftirash. And so this is for the last sitting. And also it's sunnah to sit in iftirash as well, like for all of the sittings. And if you are to sit in with the tawarruk, then this is if you're in a group with other people and you're going to be sitting on their feet by getting this extra space that tawarruk kind of takes up a little extra space. If you're going to be sitting on someone else by doing this, then of course you don't sit in this way, because like the most important thing is that you're not harming other people. And if you're harming other people with your accomplishing of the sunnah, then this sunnah is no longer sunnah. And this goes in general with many other things. And also the next one that he mentions is saying the second Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So the second time we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, this is a sunnah that is said, because the first one is the rukn that ends the prayer, and then the second one is sunnah for someone to do. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. The next part of the salah, he's going to go into the differences between the men and the women in the salah. And also, before we go into that, there's a couple other things I'll just mention in regards to when someone is praying in salah. Is there an actual place that we're supposed to look? And there's no actual place that we are told to look in the salah from like the Quran and Sunnah. In general, the person looking down in a way that's not going to be distracting for him is good. And so, of course, if looking down is going to be distracting for him, say maybe he's on a fancy prayer rug and he's just like tracing the fancy lines on the mat with his head, with his eyes. Maybe he needs to look somewhere else. Or if he closes his eyes, there's no problem with closing the eyes as well. If someone's going to be distracted by what's around them, or by what they're going to be seeing, and they're not going to focus on their salah, then closing their eyes, there's no problem with that. But the closing their eyes isn't an act of worship. So it's not like the Christians, they think that closing their eyes is something that's essential to whenever they pray. So of course, this is not something that is in Islam. Like this is not a part of prayer. But if someone does it so that they can have better khushu', then for this reason it's okay. And of course, the best thing that you're going to get from your salah is when you have that khushu', and when you have this peace and like this lowliness in your salah. This is what you will. This is what will give you the most reward from your salah, as opposed to someone whose their mind is busy and they're just looking around and they're fidgeting their whole salah. This is destroying the reward that they could get from the salah. And also, whenever something is being recited, that they have tadabbur, which is like pondering the what is being recited, and also pondering with all the different adhkar that they say, pondering the meanings of it. So learning the meanings of this is good, and also pondering the meanings while they're in salah. This will help them and get them the most from their salah, in the connection to Allah, and also getting the most reward from that. And also, when someone is getting up from salah, to use their hands when they get up from salah, and also like when they're getting up from the rak'ah. So when they're sitting, when they are in their last sujood, before coming up to the next, before doing the next rak'ah. So when they're in sujood, how do they come up to this, to standing? The way to do this is the Prophet ﷺ is narrated that he would sit, and then he would use his hands, to stand up. So to come into a sitting position and then use his hands to stand up into the next rak'ah. This is the sunnah from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the author, he doesn't mention this, but it's mentioned in other books, that go into more detail. But this is also this is often overlooked sunnah, that people oftentimes they will just automatically they'll go straight from sujood to standing. But the sunnah is to come to sitting in the iftirash, and then use their hands to come up to standing from there. And this is a sunnah in that, inshallah. And so the next thing that the author talks about, it's also kind of sunnah aspects in it, and we'll go over it quickly, inshallah. And he says here, وَالْمَرْأَةُ تُخَالِفُ الرَّجُلَ فِي خَمْسَةِ أَشْيَاء. And so he says the woman differs from the man in 5 aspects. And so here I wrote the 5 down, and I will talk about them together. Each one that is different from the woman, I'll talk about the man, and I'll talk about the woman in that particular aspect, as opposed to like separating each one of these. So he says, فالرجل يجافي مرفقيه عن جنبه ويقل بطنه عن فخذيه في الركوع. And so he says here, the man, he spreads his elbows from his sides, and when he is in sujood and ruku'. These are the times where he doesn't have his elbows like tucked in, but rather they're spread out. It's not like wings, like in ruku'. It's not necessarily wings, but it's something that's outside from it. But he spreads his elbows out from his sides when he's in like sujood. This is something he would make sujood, and his elbows should be out. In the Prophet ﷺ, it's narrated that his armpits, like the whites of his armpits, were seen while he was in sujood, because he was opening up his side, so his elbows weren't closed in, but rather they were out while he was making sujood. And this is sunnah for the man to do. And here he says, as for the woman, she tucks her body parts in together. And so she tucks in general. The woman is different than a man in that like her body, all of it is aura, or like this is something that is that should be covered. And so like when it comes to covering, if she tucks her body in together, especially as if she's in the sight of other men, then this is much more concealing than if she opens up like her arms and whatnot. And this is there's not a specific hadith for this meaning here. And in general, the woman follows the man in everything, but this is looking at the maqasid of Sharia, which is like the big principles of the Sharia and what it comes with. So looking at this, that the woman is most of the time she should be concealing herself and not revealing herself. Then she would tuck her body parts in together, because this is more concealing for her, as opposed to spreading out her elbows from her sides. And so this is one of the difference. And then also the second part was the second thing was, and separates his stomach from his thighs while bowing and prostrating. And then in general, this is something that the man should make sure whenever he's bowing or prostrating, that his stomach isn't sitting on his thighs, and he should always have this separated from this. And he doesn't mention this for the woman, but he mentions this for the man in particular. And for the third thing is that he says here, وَيَجْهُرُ فِي مَوْضِعِ الْجَهْرِ And so he also says that he raises his voice in the times of praying out loud. So when he prays, when he recites the Quran out loud, then the man raises his voice. And the woman, she lowers her voice in the presence of non-mahram men when reciting. So if she's around people, like if she's in public and there's going to be other strange men that aren't from her family and whatnot that are around her, then in this case, she wouldn't raise her voice while she's reciting in Salah, but rather she would keep her voice lowered because the beauty of a woman's voice can sometimes be can be a fitna for men if she's reciting out loud in the presence of non-mahram men. So in general, for like a woman reciting Quran, this is something that she shouldn't necessarily raise her voice in the sight of other men. Of course, she shouldn't make it, and she shouldn't beautify it in front of non-mahram men in a way that would be enticing. Of course, with the Quran, this is something that is not it's not appropriate for someone for a woman to do this, like to have like to make her voice very very like enticing while she's reciting Quran. Of course, this goes against the meaning of that. And also like the woman in general, whenever she speaks, like her voice is not aura, but at the same like it's not something that she needs to cover up like her voice when speaking to men. But at the same time, she should never talk with some type of she should speak firmly and speak with confidence and whatnot, but she shouldn't speak in a weak way or a way that's going to be seductive, or that a man that is weak would feel like this woman is playing with him or something of that sort. A person like a man that has that thing. In general, the woman should always have like a she should have like a firmness in her voice when she speaks with men and whatnot, like whether she's doing transactions and whatnot. But her voice is not necessarily aura, but it should never be like lowered in a weak in a way that would be considered a fitna or like a problem for men, or something that men are going to be attracted to the way that she's speaking. So she speaks in a way that's attractive for men when they hear her. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so in this particular issue, the woman would lower her voice if she's in a place where other men are going to hear her. And then also for the men, you would go back and وَإِذَا نَابَهُ شَيْءٌ فِي الصَّلَاةِ سَبَّحَ. And so he says, and if there's a mistake, إِذَا نَابَهُ شَيْءٌ فِي الصَّلَاةِ means like if there's a mistake in the salah, if something misses them, or for like the imam, then the men would say Subhanallah. And this, of course, is the sunnah. If the imam makes a mistake, say he forgot, say he added a sujood, or he forgot the tashahhud, or something, then we'd say Subhanallah to let him know he made a mistake. And this is sunnah for us to do. And of course, we're not talking to him, like we're not saying something that is pointed towards him, like Subhanallah is praising Allah. But it's something that is known in the salah. When someone says this is the way to make sure that someone knows that there's a mistake. And so this is for the men. As for the woman, she doesn't say Subhanallah, but rather she claps the palm of her right hand on the back of her left hand if there's a mistake in the prayer. So it's like this to get their attention. And also this is better than for her to say Subhanallah, because when the men when they hear a woman's voice, maybe they think about who is she and who is this woman that's saying. And so to get rid of all of that, if there's a mistake in the prayer, her clapping the hands, no one knows who this is. And also this gets rid of any like softness in the voice or anything of that sort that would be a fitna or something that's distracting for a man, especially while he's praying. For him to be distracted by women, this is the last time that he should be distracted by women. And of course, the women can pray behind the men, and the women should pray behind the men, not in front of the men. And this is like behind them, and farther away from them. But this is the way that if a woman saw that there was a mistake in the prayer, she would do this, as opposed to a man that would say Subhanallah. And of course, there's no fitna involved in that for men when they're praying in Salah. And so this is for the woman, and she doesn't clap this way. If the clapping is seen that way, this is not the way that woman claps in Salah. She claps with the back of her with the back of her left hand with the palm of her right hand, and that's the way that she would clap. And as for clapping in general, clapping is permissible in general. There's nothing that prohibits clapping. And the hadith that talks about that clapping is for women, this hadith is talking about the prayer. It's talking about the prayer. So it's talking about that men, it's for tasbih, and then for women, then the clapping is for them. And this hadith does not point that clapping is all clapping in all circumstances, such as if you have like someone that came up and did something wonderful and you want to give them applause, that this is only for women. No, the hadith should be understood in its context, which is this is for the salah. In regards to the salah, then innama tasfiqul nisa, like that. In regards to salah, then tasfiq, which is like clapping, is for nisa, or for women. And so, and then the last of them, the last of these things that he brings up is he says, وَعَوْرَةُ الرَّجُلِ مَا بَيْنَ سُرَّتِهِ وَرُكْبَتِهِ. And so he says, in the aura, which is the Islamic nakedness, what needs to be covered in salah for the man is what's between his belly button and his knees. And without this, then this would invalidate his salah. And of course, there's also other things that the man, if he can, then he should always have something on his shoulders, if he's able to have something on his shoulders. And this is sunnah for him to at least have something on his shoulders, even if he had like a waistcloth that covered from his belly button to his knees, with a little extra, of course, in case something was moved. Then that it would also be sunnah for him to have something, even if it was just the littlest thing, on his shoulders. And of course, the time of the Sahaba and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many of them were very, very poor, and they couldn't afford clothes except just the bare minimum what would cover their awrah, and there's just one cloth that would be wrapped around. And of course, like the amount of ni'mah that we have now and the blessings that we have now is like we don't even think about this. But this is something if we look at the hadith, we'll talk about this issue of like someone that prays in a single cloth and whatnot. And we'll see that some of the Sahaba, some of the greatest of the people that ever walked on the face of the earth, they didn't have enough money to have two cloths, like one for the top and one for the bottom, like much less a robe, or much less pants and shirts and all these other things. But when it comes to the aura, I'm going back to what we are talking about. This is for the man. It's what is between his belly button and his knees, and this comes in a hadith. And that the majority of the scholars, they say either it's the hadith is sahih. If they said that it's not sahih, some of them differed upon its authenticity. But in action, everyone acts upon it. That anything between the belly button and the knees is aura. So of course, when someone is praying, if they have pants with shirts, if they have their shirt, they should make sure that it's tucked into their pants into a way, if they make ruku', that nothing is showing from their backside or from the lower back while they make ruku'. As this sometimes the shirt will pop out when someone has either a short shirt or their pants are sagging or they don't have a belt or something of this sort. And this is all aura, and this is also what invalidates the prayer if it's shown during the prayer. Of course, someone should be mindful about this. As for the woman, as we're talking about the difference between men and women, then all of a free woman's body is awra. He says here that jamia badanil hurrati awratun. And so, like, all of a free woman's body is awra. And this is the Prophet ﷺ said that the woman is awra. And so, like, all of the woman is awra. But when it comes to salah in general, then she is allowed to show her face and hands. And he says here, illa wajhaha wa kaffayha. And so, for the salah, all of her body needs to be covered except for the face and the hands. And of course, the face starts from here, and like all of this would not be considered face. So this would be a part of the aura, according to the stronger of the opinion. Some people say like the hijab that women wear that come under the neck, and they don't necessarily show the bottom of the chin, but that this is okay. But when we look at what is obligatory for a woman, what is the face for a woman when she is washing in wudu, then it's from like the tip here to the side here to the side here and to the chin, and everything under this is not considered face. So if we're saying that she has an exception of the face and the hands while she's in salah, then that's only for the face, and then the rest of it should be covered. So there are types of hijabs that come under the chin, where a lot of the women from Syria and also from like Palestine, and also I think from Iraq, a lot of them they'll wear these hijabs that come up under here, and some of them they have a hijab that comes to here, like some of the Somali women, they'll have hijabs that come up to here, and there's no problem with that. Of course, anything extra that's covered, this is all great. And this in general is different than the issue of is the niqab obligatory or not. This is a separate issue than what the woman needs to cover when it comes to salah. Because what the woman covers in salah is a different issue than what she covers in front of like non-mahram men. What she covers in front of non-mahram men, the Shafi'i opinion that is generally agreed upon in the later people, the scholars of the Shafi'i, is that the niqab is obligatory in front of non-mahram men. And some of them, there's differences inside of the madhab as well as outside of the madhab, where they say that no, it's not obligatory, but rather it's mustahab. And this is a very, very long discussion. But in general, the point that there's a place of this difference of opinion that there's a point in this issue that has no difference of opinion. And that point is if there's a fitna from her showing her face, then she needs to cover it. And of course, like if there's a fitna, whether it's from like her, and like if she's very beautiful, if the woman's very beautiful, and someone is just going to be drawn to her face constantly like this, then this is something that's going to be a fitna, or especially if she's around other people that are they're fusaq. And like these people are dirty people, like they're given to prone to lots of evil and whatnot, and they're going to look at her in this case. Then this is also a time that she should cover her face. And this is something that's agreed upon in general by the scholars. The scholars don't disagree in this area. They disagree in general if the men were all good men and there was no fitna between them. In this case, is she allowed to raise the niqab or not? And this is the difference of opinion that comes in this place. And like the opinion of the Shafi'i opinion is that she would always cover her face unless she's in front of like mahram or in front of her family and whatnot, or like or if there's a definite need for it, such as if she's giving shahada or she needs her identity needs to be checked, and to raise her niqab for the ID card and for someone to check that she's who she is, then this is okay to be seen. And of course, leaving the difference of opinion and wearing it is always the best thing, and Allah knows best. So this is and this is what he says about the free woman's body: is all of her body is awra except for the face and hands. And a slave woman is like a man in this matter. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, that the slave woman has a lot more relaxation when it comes to what she covers in regards to in regards to that, as opposed to like a free woman. And of course, we don't necessarily have these in this day. And of course, the Sharia in general is constantly calling for the freedom of any slaves. And slaves in Islam are not like slaves in the rest of especially the West. But slaves in Islam, they have rights. They have certain things that are for them that they would never have outside of Islam, such as like if a slave woman is beat on her face, and then this was a reason that the Prophet ﷺ had a slave girl set free, because her master got mad and slapped her on her face. And so basically the Prophet ﷺ, he said that this woman needs to be set free. And also there's many other rulings in regards to like slavery in Islam, that when somebody looks at it, they realize that this is not the slavery that we think about when we hear the word slavery. It's something that's totally different. And there's a lot of wisdom to it. And there's also a lot of things in the Sharia in general that are pointed to the freeing of slaves. But a slave woman in general would not be looked at in the same way as a free woman in the meanings of like her dignity and whatnot. So here in the Shafi opinion is that if she wore what a man wore, even if like her head was uncovered and this stuff in Salah, then her Salah would be valid. And Allah knows best. A lot of the scholars, they say no, she's like a free woman in all of this, and there's no difference between her, and Allah knows best. But in general, like the slave women were allowed to uncover their face, and they were given much more liberties when it came to what they were wearing, as opposed to a free woman. So, and the reason for this is because they're a slave woman. They're not as a reason for as much fitna as a free woman would be in this matter. And this is something that's discussed. But in general, if we took like the safer of the opinions, they'd be just like a free woman. And of course, this is not something that we deal with in this day and age. والله تعالى أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير